Welcome back to another episode of the Mollie James Show. Today, I'm honored to have our special guest, Katie Pace. Katie is now the Director of Operations of the James Clinic, but she has a very compelling story that I wanted her to share today because not only does she have her own story, but she's been hearing the stories of so many people calling in and talking about their cancer journey. So, Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for having
Yes.
me.
Yes. So, a lot of people probably don't know that we grew up in the same small town.
We did. We did.
So, we know
It's
all
a
the
small
same people.
world.
Yep. All the
Yep.
gossip. But really, it's our relationship has grown and changed so much. So tell people kind of how you started with the clinic and then how that's evolved now.
Yeah. So I actually reached out to Dr. James when prior to my diagnosis, something just didn't quite feel right. So I have been working with her for years, and it evolved really when the diagnosis hit, and I called and I said, I'm panicked. I don't know what to do. So we walked through that whole treatment, which I'll get into in a minute. But, um, I was faced with some difficult decisions and we walked through that together. And I was so thankful to have someone on my side that was really pulling for me. And we decided, I was in a better spot than I was before, and she needed some assistance with the clinic. So we really just kind of worked it out together, and that's how we got back together after so many years. So it's been such a great time coming back and being on this side of medicine. I call it the good side of medicine after being in corporate for so long. So excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So tell people a little bit about your background before James Clinic because I think that's a really important part of how you ended up in, the kind of the friction part of your story.
Yeah. I was employed with an ortho clinic. So I'm an X-ray tech by trade, did CT, was on the ambulance crew and firefighting and all of those things up by Des Moines. But I was most recently in an ortho clinic and I was assistant director of operations there. We had very large clinics, 40 plus surgeons and 7 plus locations. So you can imagine you were spread, lots of different things, lots of irons in the fire. Very high, very, very high um, expectations, and you kind of thrive off of that. That fight or flight mode was kind of consistent. So that's kind of where I came from. But so many things cross over into the integrative piece when you have a really good chance with that.
So that led you to the next step, which is you had your third baby.
I did.
Tell us about
Three
that.
boys.
That's kind of a wild story, and I think
It's
there's probably a
it's
lot of moms out there that can relate.
it's a little wild. Third baby, we everything was going great. All of a sudden, about 30 weeks, my blood pressure skyrocketed, and they said, "Hey, we got to go now." It was in the middle of COVID. He was born June of 2020, so right smack dab in the middle of COVID, which was exhausting all on its own. Um, but we had an emergency C-section in the middle of the day, and nobody could come in except my husband. So, I have a very close family, as I know you do, Dr. James. So it was really interesting trying to make those decisions, being foggy from all of the meds that they had to give you, and making those decisions what was right for your child and what was right for you, and not being able to see your child for 4 days because he was in the NICU and you were on the floor still hooked up to all of the things. So um that was an interesting experience in the middle of COVID, and it kind of just brings you back to the decision making that we do so many times during the day and try to help with our patients. But that's kind of the turning point as to when things started to go like maybe the traditional route wasn't quite for me at that point. Um, so we were in the NICU for 37 days, the longest 37 days of our lives. Um, Nobody was able to go in or out of the NICU except me and my husband Randy. And so my parents were trying to help with the other 2 boys at home. We were splitting the days. You couldn't stay the night there. So if you can imagine leaving your 2 pound, 14-ounce baby overnight in the NICU by themselves in the middle of this crazy time in our world. We're
I don't think
stronger
there's
because of it.
I don't think there's very many people out there that could walk away from that with
It
the
was
current.
difficult. It was difficult.
Yeah.
So you just make the best decisions you can. But
Mhm.
after that, we were breastfeeding, and I was being mandated a shot that I didn't believe in, and I made that very well known. And I it was either get take the shot and lose our insurance because my husband's self-employed, or you don't have what you need for your, you know, 30-weeker baby with that's seeing for a specialist. So I took one for the team. No one else in our family did. The shot, I took one, and 2 months later, we found a tumor in my breast that was triple negative and had grown to a 3C. I'll let you talk a little bit more about that, but 3C breast cancer, triple negative breast cancer in 2 months.
Yeah. And this story just makes me sick to my stomach because
Mhm,
you knew and you were just in a
mhm,
position where you had no choice, and
mhm.
the people who forced that upon you aren't living the circumstances, and I think it's worked out for the best in the long run for
It
all of
has.
us.
It has.
That's a pretty dark road to walk through, to be
Mhm,
forced to take something you don't believe in and then end up with some massive health consequences as a
mhm,
result of that. So walk us through. So you're a very young mom, you have a newborn baby at home, and now you've
mhm.
got a cancer diagnosis, breast cancer.
Yeah.
Um, Stage 3B is a locally advanced with
Mhm,
positive nodes.
mhm.
Uh, Tell us what your thoughts were, and then how that was presented to you up front.
You know, I'll be honest, I don't remember part of that, but I will go through everything I can. It went very quickly. I had worked with some radiologists that when we found that there was a problem, I called in favors because that's what you do when you get faced, you pull in all of the troops. So we went and had a mammo, an ultrasound, and a biopsy all on the same day. After that, the next day they called me and said, "Hey, this is for sure cancer. We're not sure what it is, or where, all of the things. We'll send it to pathology. We got to get going on this right now." So within a week, I had seen the wonderful Dr. Susan Beck. I know that you know her personally, Dr. James, and I truly believe I would not be here without her. She was fantastic and was so supportive in every single role. I got an oncologist that was helpful. Go ahead.
Yeah, she's one of the surgeons that trained me. I just want to throw that in there
Yes.
because
Yes.
we all love ourselves some Dr. Susan Beck.
She was phenomenal. Um, so, I got the care team, and actually I called you and said, "I don't know what to do. I am at a rock and a hard place." And at that point, you said, Katie, I think we better go for this because it's rocking and rolling. We're getting pretty close. I mean, it went from nothing to, you know, stage 3+ in 2 months. So it it was time to put the pedal to the metal and rock and roll with whatever treatments we could.
Mhm.
So we upturned our lives. I signed all of the paperwork that I thought I needed at my job. They were, supportive at first, and you know, you hope that when you're in a situation like this, you don't have to worry about the small things, but that's all you worry about. You weren't necessarily worried about yourself. You're worried about how are my kids going to get to school? What are we going to eat tonight? Those stupid small things that shouldn't matter are kind of what take over your thoughts. And so your day to day, going in and getting infusions, and you're setting it up so that your kids don't see that you're gone in the morning, and you're not sick at night when they're at home taking a nap right before they come home at night, just so that you can kind of have some semblance of a life. It's strenuous for any person, but especially with people with small kids.
Yeah, and at that time we weren't doing the integrative cancer piece, and I knew we weren't there, and so
Mhm,
you were doing standard of care treatment. And what did that
mhm.
encompass?
I did 16 rounds of chemo. It was difficult. It was really hard on my body. It was really hard emotionally. I am so thankful that I have had the care team around me that I had, I think that they were probably a little bit more to the understanding that traditional was maybe not the only treatment possible. And so they were, okay with me looking outside the box on some of the things that you and I could work with together. But just being surrounded by family and understanding that you're going to get up, and it is a mindset. My dad told me, my dad is a previous cancer survivor too, and he said, Kate, it's mind over matter. If you don't mind, it don't matter. And I thought I was so irritated with him when he told me that. Like, seriously, Dad, I'm going through that. Like, can you not just help me out here? But it's very true. Um, and you would wake up every morning and say, not today. We're not doing this today. Today's going to be a good day. And I really think that the mindset on that, and having that understanding that you're gonna beat this, and no matter what happens, people have your back. I think that's so important to hold on to.
Yeah, and I think we'll get into this more, but that's one of our messages for people out there
Yes.
is we hear them going in and getting this devastating news and they just give up. They just say, "Oh, that's
Hmm.
my future. What that person
Hmm.
just said, I'm going to die." They
Hmm.
accept that in their brain. And so I think that mental piece that this isn't going to happen. I'm in control of this and we're going to be
Hmm.
okay is so
Hmm.
important for people.
It is. And it was really hard. One of the decisions that I made is when I was done with my treatment, they're like, "Oh, are you ready? Let's ring the bell." I said, "I'm not ringing that bell." And they just looked at me like, I said, "I am not going to be the one ringing the bell in front of some of these people that will never do that." And, that's an option for me. I don't think that's an option for everyone, but I just couldn't in my right heart. And not, no shame to the people that do it. I think it's a great thing. You see all of these people around you and you sit next to them, sometimes the same people, day after day, week after week, and you get to know them from a personal standpoint. And I'm like, we've got this. You're going to be right behind me. We've got this. And just having that outlook and understanding that this isn't it, there's other options out there, there's other things to do, is so important.
Yeah. So walk us through the part where things got a little rough and you called us.
Yes. um it was about 3/4 of the way through the treatment, so I had 16 rounds of chemo total. um and I was at the last part where they call the red devil, which is the adriamycin. Am I correct on how to say that, Dr. James? Adriamycin, okay. um
That's
anyone
super.
who has Yes, yes. Anyone who's had that or has had someone who understands what that is, they call it red devil for a reason. It is bright red as my cup, when they inject it into you and you put ice in your mouth so that you don't get mouth sores, all of the things. But it kicks you hard. And when I received the first dose, I was so sick I couldn't get out of bed for a couple days. And this was towards, like I said, 3/4 and towards the end of treatment. And I looked at my husband, I said, "We got to do something. I can't get out of bed." I knew that that was, I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink anything. My mouth was sore. And he said, I can't watch you do this. I'm calling Dr. Mollie. He said, "You can call anybody you want. I don't know if I can get there." So he called your office. We got the wonderful Anita, which I can't even speak highly enough of. We truly have such a great team. But Anita was there then and said, "Come to Sheraton. I'll get an infusion for you. We'll set you in the hyperbaric. We'll get you turned around." Just to preface, I had sat in the office in the infusion center at the cancer center um, for 4.5 hours at a time getting potassium infusions. And I needed multiple potassium infusions to be able to have my next surgery that I truly needed. My numbers were so low. I had blood transfusions and potassium infusions and all of the things, and I couldn't keep my numbers up. My body was so depleted. So I went down to Sheraton, spent some time in her infusion chair. It was wonderful. They take such great care of you, but I was just so miserable. I couldn't even have a conversation. And so I sat there, got the infusion. My husband brought me home, and the next day my numbers were up. And so when we called you, you said, "Come down and do it again." And so I had a port. We just go down, we take care of the port. we get the infusion. In 2 weeks, I was able to have my surgery. And it was truly that was the turning point of my journey as to knowing, okay, this is for real. Like this is helping people. Why are we not able to do this everywhere? And why are people not educating themselves on this?
Yeah. Yeah. So you ended up having surgery after that.
Mhm. Yes.
And now where are
Yes.
you?
So, I was terminated from my job, after, my FMLA was exhausted, and, I had mentioned that to you. I said, "Hey, I'm not really sure what I'm gonna do here, but we're gonna take the summer and enjoy all of the things with the boys." Um, just to be completely frank, when you are at your worst and you feel your worst, you don't want to be around people. You want to be around your people, but you don't want to be out in the community or helping people. You're just trying to get your feet underneath of you. So I took that summer and I had the best summer with my kids. We went and did all of the things. But I am not meant to be at home. I love my children, but I'm not meant to be at home full time with them. So when Dr. J said, "Hey, what do you think about coming to work for the James Clinic?" I immediately was on board and I haven't looked back since. And I hope you haven't either.
Yeah, so I knew she ran a big clinic and we were growing and we needed somebody with operations because we're all clinical. And so we
Mhm.
needed someone to help us put it together and build some feet under a
Yeah,
foundation.
yeah.
So we brought you on and yeah, it's been great. So explain to people, so that's your very personal story. Like you went through
Yes.
hell. You
Yeah, it
went
was hell.
and the people who put
Hmm.
you there terminated you, which
Hmm.
I will forever hold those people in my mind in a very certain place.
Yes, you're not
um,
the only one.
I think that I think that is absolutely despicable, and that is the failure of healthcare right now. Is that we subjected healthcare workers, healthcare professionals to a shot that nobody knew about that had all these side effects, and we created circumstances like what you had to do, where you questioned if you'd be able to be a mom and take care of your babies. Like that is infuriating to me. That's what fuels me.
Hmm.
Tell people just so we can now bring that full circle. You've
Yeah,
spent the last week or two talking to our incoming cancer patients.
I have.
And I've been hearing appalling things once they sit in front of me and tell me what their standard of care team is telling them. So
Yeah,
what are you hearing? What are people looking for that are diagnosed with cancer that are calling our office? Like what's the vibe?
they're looking for hope. They have none right now. Sorry if I get emotional. It's been an emotional week talking to these people, and my heart is just so full that we have that opportunity to do that. They're looking for hope. They don't want to feel miserable. Most of them have lived a very fulfilling life. A lot of them are or excuse me, not medical professionals. They're professionals in whatever their profession is, but they have, um, you know, they have people counting on them just like I did on me. And they're
Mhm,
saying, I can't miss 8 weeks of work for this. What can we do?
mhm,
Um, I've spoken to lots of family members that have come on and said, I don't know how to help them, but I'm doing all of the research. Tell me all of the things. What do you guys do differently? And I simply tell them everything. We do everything differently. And it's not because we don't believe in some of the traditional meds. It's not because we don't believe in some of those routes. It's because there's a better way. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. If you choose to do that route, we'll support you with some of the other things. If you choose that that's not your route, we'll absolutely support you in that as well. And it's figuring out that care plan with our care team that's really going to help you and getting that integrative approach where, maybe your oncologist doesn't want to work with us, but we don't have a problem working with them. It's really eye opening for some of these patients and their family members.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing to emphasize is we're truly integrative. And a lot of these people I'm sitting down with that have breast cancer, melanoma, they're
Mm-hmm.
asking to go have surgery. Like this would be curative for you. You need to go have an operation, and they're just baffled because they think I'm going to do vitamins. And like, yes, we're gonna talk about that too, but
Hmm.
you don't leave low hanging fruit on the table when this is something potentially that you're done. And so
Hmm.
we do recommend, their patients come in with a lumpectomy and say, what about radiation? I'm like, you should talk to them about that.
Hmm.
If you don't want it,
Hmm.
that's your choice, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. So
Hmm.
not always are we against it. We're against it where it's causing more harm than good. And
Hmm.
I do believe across the board that they're overselling the benefit and underplaying the risk when you look
I
at
will
that.
tell you, yes, absolutely. And the risk isn't short term. It is long term risk. It
Hmm.
is neuropathies. It is weight gain. It is unable to lose the weight afterwards. And people don't see that as a risk, but it's putting your other,
Yeah,
it's putting you at a higher risk for all the other things. There's
yeah,
so many different aspects to this.
yeah,
And so having that support, that additional support and the what ifs is so important.
yeah. And what I'm hearing, what I've heard in the last 2 weeks from just specific patients, one of them has colon cancer and started mistletoe and got imaging, which we always tell people if you start mistletoe, don't get imaging for a while because it's going to look
Mhm.
bigger. So we did, and it looked bigger. And they told her if you don't start two new chemotherapies now, you're going to die in 18 months. First of all, how does anybody know
How do you
that?
know that?
How do you
Yeah.
know that? Why
Yeah.
would you tell somebody that? Why would anyone put a timestamp on someone else's timeline? That to me is despicable. And even in the ICU, when I was asked this, I would say days to weeks because we don't know. We
No.
don't know. Hours to days to weeks, weeks to months, I don't
Mhm.
know. This is the
Mhm.
best thing to tell you. And I even hated doing it then, but they just wanted some kind of semblance, right? For
Sure,
are we going to
absolutely.
stop work and travel in, or are we going to get
Yes.
home? They wanted some kind of something.
Mhm.
I've had an 80-year-old female that was told if she did nothing, she'd be dead in 2 months with a breast cancer. That's been there
It's
probably several years.
yeah, maybe longer than that. You
Yeah.
know, some of the things that I'm hearing on the phones, a lot of times I'm talking to the patient's family and they're asking questions
Hmm.
and I'm asking questions back. How are they feeling? Are they getting up in the morning? Are they getting dressed? Are they taking a shower? Are they eating? What
Hmm.
are they eating? Without getting into the weeds on all of the things, nutrition is so important. And that's one of the things that, our nurses and you and our providers just talk so highly about is if you have the wrong nutrition, this baby's gonna blow up. And that's maybe lack of better terms on that, but it's so true. It's so vital, and knowing what to eat and when to eat it is so important. So it's really all avenues. But when they're calling me and they're saying they're not getting out of bed, they've got to get up. They've got to move. They have to get outside. They need the light. They need all of those things.
Yeah.
And if they've given up hope, then at the end of the day, there's nothing that we're going to be able to do that's going to be able to help them.
Right. And that's what I tell people. I ask
Hmm.
them the first time I meet them, like, do you think you can beat this? Because if you don't, let's not spend your money on this. Go do
Hmm.
something else.
Hmm.
And I have some people that I question where they're at mentally because
Yeah.
and it's not their fault. They've just been given hit with bad news over and over and
Yes.
over. And I try to tell them, I'm like, well, your doctors gave you that based on the information they have with their pathway. They don't know about our
Hmm.
pathway. They don't know.
Hmm.
And one of the really infuriating things for me, if you read the book Radical Remission by Dr. Kelly Turner, one of the first things she says is she was a counselor working with cancer patients, and she started to see people who did better than expected. And a theme that she found is that the doctors would tell their patients, don't tell anybody about this. So even when
Hmm.
there are these amazing outcomes that are inexplicable, don't tell anybody because we don't want to give anyone false hope. That to me, like, if you were a thinking person and you saw somebody who did better than you thought they would do, the question would be, what did you do differently? How
What?
can we apply
Why?
it so everybody else can do good too, do very well? Um, So when we designed, and we're still refining our cancer program at James Clinic, I just want to address
Yes.
that need. So there's 3 steps to this. So step 1 is the terrain assessment, or why did your body make a cancer and how can we stop that process?
Mhm.
Like what's going on? inflammation, blood sugar, vitamin levels, nutrition levels. Do you have any environmental toxins, heavy metals, things like that? We're
Mhm,
looking at all of those things. So like we just want to make your body inhospitable to cancer.
mhm,
That's step one. Step two is a lot of people come to us like you did who have had other treatments and need relief of the symptoms. This is where we catch a lot of people because they haven't heard about us, because they were
mhm,
given devastating news and like, we need to start chemotherapy tomorrow. They're
mhm.
given a sense of urgency. So step two is mitigation, using our tools to help make them feel better and alleviate the problems that they've created. And then step three are some of these cancer treatments that are outside the box, which is where it gets really fun, to be honest, when we see
Yes.
outcomes. Um, so we have a patient that was getting, I'm just thinking of running a very large business, multiple employees, one of those can't slow downs, and
Mhm.
literally told me I couldn't get out of bed. Like I was in so much pain from my immunotherapy and what I was doing. And the doctors just, I kept telling them, and they double down, double down, double down. And they didn't stop it. They didn't hit the brakes. They didn't pump the brakes. Couldn't get out of bed. And then I met him 2 or 3 weeks later, and he said, I just got back from a snowmobile trip.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah,
Um,
because
the
it,
immunotherapy is so hard on our bodies.
yes. Then that was just really rewarding to me, is whether we don't have a problem with people continuing standard of care if it's going
No,
well, if that's their choice and their preference. We want to help make sure that they don't look and feel like a cancer patient along the way. I think that's an important piece.
it is. I'm so glad you mentioned that actually. One of the things that I told my husband all the time is if I could just have my hair back, I think nobody would know that I'm sick. And he's like, okay, babe, if that's what you need to tell yourself. But it's so true. It's an internal battle, right? It sounds so silly. Something so easy about hair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for
And
sure.
if you don't have your identity, then you start to lose everything. So you have to surround yourself with the people that know the real you and can bring that identity out regardless of if you feel like it or not.
Yeah. So talk more about people that are calling in. Kind of are they catching us early? Are they catching us late? Like where are they in their journey on average? Or what are some things that
Yeah,
stand out to you about the stories you've heard lately? Because it is, and this is one of the things as a clinic owner and an employer that I have to be concerned about, is the mental health of my people answering phones, because it is
it's
heavy.
it's heavy. It's heavy. All of the above. They're coming at us super early. I just got diagnosed. I heard about you. My buddy from 2 states over told me about it. I
Mhm.
just spoke with a farmer yesterday, that's close to our Iowa office that said, "Hey, I've done livestock treatment for years. I'm a farmer. I don't want to take this stuff. I know what it does." I'm gonna say the off-brand word like ivermectin and Finbin, and that's exactly what they're thinking of. And I know we'll get into that in a little bit. But those hot topic words, they're doing their research on some of the things. So those people are the easy, and I don't want to say easy because none of this is easy, but they understand that there's more things out there. And so figuring out um what they have, what they want, what kind of treatment they're looking for, and where they're at in their lifestyle is a huge the number one thing that he asked me yesterday is, "Well, what do you do about nutrition?" Because I'm sure that some of this stuff, and I said, "You're absolutely right," and we go over that.
Mhm.
I talk a lot about the Calvary. We're gonna send the Calvary for you. Like we have our nurses, we have our office staff, we have our practitioners, and we're gonna surround you. We're gonna help you with your labs. We're gonna help you with that. That's another question. How am I gonna pay for all of this? What do the labs cost? Is my insurance gonna pay for anything? um it's a concern, and so we walk through all of those options, but it's truly on the phones the whole spread. You have those that are just starting out treatment and they're looking for their right and where they fit in, and then you have the people that have been told, like you mentioned earlier, Dr. James, I'm at the end. We're throwing a Hail Mary. We don't have anything left. We want to try anything you have.
Mhm.
And I'm very upfront with them and say, "Oh, I wish you would have found us so much sooner, but we'll do everything we can to help you." And even if that help is making them comfortable, making them feel better, spending whatever time they have left in the best possible place that they can.
Mhm.
So we're really seeing it all. But the hardest part that pulls at my heartstrings is the family members, because the cancer patients are not worried about themselves.
Mm.
If you're talking to a cancer patient on the phone, he's like, "Oh, I'll be fine, I'll be fine, but how's my wife gonna get me there if I can't get out of bed?" That's their focus.
Mhm.
And the family members are very much the opposite way. "I don't think I can get him out of bed. What do we need to do, or how can I get to you?" And
Mhm.
so we sort through those options when they're at the lower at the tail end of things.
Yeah, I've had this is kind of funny because family,
Yeah.
God love them. They want to be
Oh,
helpful.
yes.
That goes to
Yes.
the extreme. So I've literally had two different family members of the patient asking about coffee enemas, and the look on the patient's face was horrified. And I said, "Let's back that train up because coffee enema.
Literally.
I'm not feeling the vibe from over here, and maybe we'll get there." But can you imagine having a diagnosis and then hearing coffee enemas as part of your treatment plan? And they're
Yeah.
great, don't get me wrong, but you have to meet people where they are. And again, sometimes these
Right.
well-intentioned family members, they get very overwhelmed. Like the patients get very overwhelmed because they're processing all of
Mhm.
the emotions and the logistics and the finances.
Yeah.
And there's the IV stuff and the oral stuff and the diet stuff and like the drinking the water and the air. And they get extremely overwhelmed. So again, I feel like
Mm.
we like let's get our feet on the ground.
Yes.
Let's get back to
Yes.
basics. Let's think
Yep.
this through. We're not in a rush. Give it
Mhm.
some time. Feel what feels good to you, and then
Mhm.
take that path. And I will keep everyone else at bay. We're not going to
Yeah.
copy enemas
Well,
today.
not today.
Yeah,
Tomorrow's not looking so good either.
yeah,
One of the things that I try to tell the family members, because they want to do something.
yeah,
That's where they're at. They want to feel useful. They want to feel like they're doing something to help.
right.
And so one of the things that I say is, well, why don't you go get all the records for them? Prep
Mhm.
all the records, go get all the records so that we can look at them. And that is one less thing that they don't want to be on the phone with their people, right? Nobody wants to call out for records. That's so helpful. So if someone's looking, for something to do to help someone else, that is a huge responsibility to help.
Yeah,
Um, the other thing I tell the family members on the phone when they're calling in and saying, "I just feel like I'm useless right now." What Go over and ask, if it's not a family member that lives right with them, and please be very cautious on who you're asking this, because they are very emotional. But what can you do outside? What can you do that's not right next to them, because they don't want to feel smothered? They want to be surrounded by their people, but they don't need them right here all the time. And
mhm,
so that's a lot of the conversations that I have on the phone. They're asking me, because they understand that I've been through it personally, well, what was the most helpful for you? And
mhm,
so we have those conversations too, but it gets pretty deep pretty quick. And so the mental health of the people on the phones, like you mentioned, and the mental health of the family members and the cancer patient themselves, I'm like, you really need to surround yourself with people that are your people, regardless of who those people are. They're your people, and they understand when sometimes it's time to back off and sometimes it's time to push forward.
yeah, absolutely. And to that end, when you're the one who's on the outside and you know someone needs help and you just want to be helpful, I think there's some pieces of advice we can share. One of them
Yes.
is if you want to make food, you need to find out what they're eating because there's
Yes.
specific diets. And literally, if we're not cooking something that's going to be helpful for them, you're hurting them. And
Hmm.
asking a question like, "Hey, what are some things you're eating, or do you have any dietary preferences, or
Hmm.
direct me to where what kind of food I can make to bring in that would be
Yes.
helpful." Because we don't want
Yes.
them to throw it away. We don't want that to be wasted effort, but also diet is so critically important for people.
It is. It is. And sometimes it's just, hey, do you want to go out? Can I just take a walk with you? Can I pick you up and go for a walk? Getting outside and, a little bit of grounding never hurt. All of those things. I think that's a huge point, Dr. James, is what what works for your family, not what's convenient for me doing it so that I can make myself feel better for helping. It's what's convenient for your family. Mhm.
Yeah, nice. Um, The other thing I think it's important that we touch on is finances, because for people, cost is extremely intimidating when we're looking at you're getting hospital costs and diagnostics and copays and hospital bills, and then you're looking at doing this other stuff too.
Hmm.
We know in our clinic that everybody has a certain amount of time and a certain amount of money and a certain budget they have to work within. So I've tried really hard to set that up in a way that I don't judge. Like, here are your options.
Hmm.
Pick and choose off of that menu what works for you. Don't
Hmm.
feel bad if it looks different than somebody else's, because we understand that. We have people that are
Hmm.
hours away they can't travel in, or literally
Hmm.
almost killed themselves trying to travel 2 hours in, get an infusion, and 2 hours home because it was so
Hmm.
exhausting. Can you
Hmm.
speak to that a little bit? We try to be extremely upfront with our costs, which are a tiny fraction of that standard of care piece, which is the really frustrating part for me.
It is. I think I've heard you mention before, that people assume that their insurance card is just a black Amex and it just you charge and it goes away. That is not the case at all. Speaking from a personal standpoint, you know, I was thankful that my husband, you know, had his own, we owned our own business. And so he had flexible hours and we had people to help and we had childcare to help. But there's a lot of people that don't have that. And so if you don't have the insurance piece of things clouding that judgment, sometimes you're better off. I mean, we had insurance and it still was a financial hit to us regardless because we were spending, I think ended up being in the 20,000s range even with the insurance. At 37, you're not prepared for that, or most people aren't prepared for that. Um, when you're on the phone with these people, the number one thing I ask is, do you know what your deductible is? Because we start out with, labs and anything else that we need to be able to support these patients. And that's one of the things. Do you know what your deductible is, or do you know what your copay is for a lab, or what lab do you prefer? And they're like, oh, I have no idea. I'm like, that is something you need to know. You can call your insurance company, all of those things, because there is a huge difference. And so that cost is something that people understand when you're
Mhm.
talking about what it covers and what it doesn't. And even though most everything you pay out of pocket to 100% until you hit deductible these days, and some of the deductibles are $16,000. And I said, do you have an HSA? Like, let us help you. Do you have an FSA? We can utilize those things. And they are flabbergasted. What do you mean we can utilize those things? You've got to go.
Okay, we'll edit it.
Sorry. Go get Maddox. Go get Maddox. I'm sorry, you guys.
That's okay.
Um, I
Sam is
really
a
lost my point.
Sam is a master. We were talking about
Thanks, Sam.
HSA cards. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So tell us about the HSA card. What is that, and how come? Like, how do we know that can be used for James Clinic things and cancer
Yeah.
clinic?
So the HSA or FSA, either one, it goes off of your tax ID technically and what you are registered in from that perspective. And so when you look at those things, we are under a medical care clinic, and so we can give you an itemized receipt if we turn it in, and then everything can go like that. The HSA card is so helpful. I wish more people understood how to utilize that better. The FSA as well. The difference between an FSA and an HSA is an FSA is a flex spending account. You have that for a year, and if you don't use it, you lose it. The HSA can be rolled over. So that's when you have your high deductible plans that you can put money tax free into an HSA account. And you can utilize that for any of our services. We can utilize that for any of them. And most other locations you can too. And so knowing what you have on that is
Mhm.
so, so important up front because of those things. And if you know that, hey, I can get you cash labs at $50 a month instead of what could be maybe $350 a month, and you can use your HSA for that. That is life changing for people.
Mhm.
So we work really, really hard on that end of things to make sure that we're making and helping you make the best decision we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's clinics out there too. The standard of care gets expensive very quickly. We had a patient who I actually ended up diagnosing her with metastatic lung cancer to the brain. She presented with cognitive issues. And I ended up sending her to the ER because she didn't have insurance and she needed this system. She needed this system. Like, she was one of those people that needed the social worker to help her get enrolled in Medicaid.
Mhm.
And really what she wanted was vitamin C infusions and hyperbarics. Um, she ended up getting whole brain radiation, which is about $100,000 of treatment through her Medicaid plan, which she needed. And she basically ended up getting vitamin C infusions through us based on donations.
Mhm.
And we did a little bit to help her out as well. This is this insanity of the system. She wanted a $200 infusion once a week. That would have been a fraction of the whole brain radiation. I'm not saying that was the wrong thing to do, but it's not what she wanted. And so, we're a fraction of those costs and of those charges. And for people who want this pathway, there needs to be a way for them to access that because it would save the entire system money.
It would, and it would make the patient feel whole.
Hmm.
That radiation is so exhausting. And again, not that that was that right or wrong decision, but
Hmm.
being able to supplement that and however that we can to make them feel even just a little bit better. I can tell you, I felt like I could have done something the day after my infusions with the James Clinic. I felt like I could get up and actually make breakfast for my children. And I know that that seems silly, but they hadn't had that in weeks. They hadn't had, they would come home from school and be like, "Oh, mom's on the couch again." That's not a way to live, and there's
None.
more options.
There on the
I know,
couch.
I know. Yeah,
So,
so I think from going back to your question on a payment perspective, I try to explain to the patients or the family members calling in that we do everything that we can to utilize whatever resources that you have. And what that resource looks like, whether it's HSA or FSA or insurance, we'll do whatever we can to help that. But the actual clinical piece, your one-on-ones with the clinicians is really what you're paying for. But it's not just that, it's the entire team approach.
mhm.
I was speaking to one of the patients that is currently being treated by us, and I think I spoke to him 4 or 5 times last week. And he kept apologizing. I'm so sorry for calling in. And I'm like, honey, this is what we're here for. What can we do to help you? And he's like, it makes my heart feel so much better, that I can call in and ask a question and you're getting back to me within a couple hours. And, you're that turnaround time. And I said, if you have questions, we're going to get them answered. And obviously that turnaround time can't be that great every day. But
Mhm.
if I can get an answer for him while he's on the phone, I'm going to absolutely do whatever I can to make his day just a little bit better. And I think that's the difference. You have people not just with the James Clinic, but there are people out there that really do want to help you. They're in healthcare for the right reasons still after all of this that's gone down. And
Yeah.
it's just kind of figuring out what your tribe looks like.
Yeah. Well, and what people don't realize is through this process, we found the needs of the patients coming to see us, they're heavy. They need
Mhm,
a lot of support. And we're
mhm.
even now still redesigning that to, hire the staff that can do that and going somewhere where people genuinely care about you. Where again, you feel that connection. So many people compliment our staff, and you're a huge part of that.
Thank you.
That the vibe is good and people are kind and patient with them, and you're not just cattle being herded through, whatever that's called, where you do that. Because I'm not a farmer. Um, but
Mm,
it's not herding cattle through, right? It's you're an individual, and we're looking at you while everybody else is looking at your cancer. We keep the focus on the patient and how do you feel about it. I had a
mhm.
patient yesterday that she's 80 and she cuts hair and she's starting to get neuropathy from her chemotherapy. I'm like, you tell them you
Yeah,
can't have neuropathy because you're going to be
yeah,
done cutting hair if you can't feel your fingers. Like, this is a
yeah.
different thing for you than the
Mhm.
next person who maybe doesn't use their hands. And so just individualizing it and telling people, like, your concerns are validated. You need to speak up. You are not on a roller coaster driven by somebody else. This is your train. You're driving.
Absolutely. And, a lot of the questions that we get is, well, should I be telling my oncologist that I'm seeing you? And I
Yes.
said, that's up to you. You have to make the best of choice for you and your family. But
Yeah.
ultimately, we're not going to hide anything and we want to support you however we can. And that conversation is just crazy that there would be somebody out there that would not support you in doing what you truly felt was the right thing to do for you and your family.
And that's a hard one for me because I want to empower the patient so much, right? Like if there's somebody on your
Yes.
team, like if they're your hired help, doctors are
Yes.
your hired help. They're there to
Hmm.
help you. They're not there to tell you what to do. So
No.
if they're not serving your best interests, fire them. But there's
Yep.
so many patients who are scared, right? Like that's their tie to survival. And they
Hmm.
really need that lifeline, they feel like, in case things go off kilter, they don't want to lose that. So I'm always like, be honest with your team about what you're doing. But in
Hmm.
our circumstance, we understand our position. And what I
Hmm.
tell people is they don't need to know what we're doing because we've accounted for what they're doing. And we will
Hmm.
bend our what we offer to make sure it doesn't hurt what they're doing. And it only helps and enhances any of the standard of care treatments that you're getting. So we take that responsibility on and we
Hmm.
shift what we're doing around what they're doing.
Hmm. I think it's really interesting that you just said that, mostly because, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is they said, "Well, my doctor told me I couldn't do the vitamin C treatments and that I should be stopping oral vitamin C." And I go, Excuse me?" And he said, "Yeah, she told me not to take it." I said, "Oh dear. Okay. Well, let's get you set up with an appointment because it was firing on all of the cylinders." And it's not because it's an education on all of the medical piece. It's the education specific to what you're doing. And you have done, Dr. James, just to salute, you've done so much for the organization of educating us and yourself on this. But I've heard you say multiple times, well, that's why we pick up books because things change and new information comes out, and you have to stay up with the times in order to be able to do that. And it's very apparent that not everyone sees that this is the only way to do it. And that's just not how you can have things done these days.
No, you
Ever
can't.
evolving.
Yeah, you can't get your source of information from one source because there's so much bias in medicine because it's an industry, it's a business, it's a
Hmm.
industrial complex.
Hmm.
So, that's the most infuriating thing is their oncologists tell their patients stop taking all vitamins. Like, do you want me to stop eating food too? And actually, we do. Fast food, right?
just the bad food, right?
Well, yeah, but you know, the oncology world is the ones who published on IV vitamin C. Like this is their data, and just because a doctor isn't familiar with evidence and data doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So that's an infuriating piece of this. But we are running out of time, and anyone
Mhm.
out there can see why you're such a valuable part of our team. You do such a
Mhm.
lovely
Thank
job,
you.
and we're so delighted to have you. But I wanted to
Thank
just
you.
give you a chance to round out some final thoughts today about your experience. And if somebody's out there really struggling because they love somebody with cancer or they're worried about it or they're in treatment and suffering, what would you tell them?
Pick up the phone. Just pick up the phone and call. And it's not even this, I don't want this to even sound like a sales pitch because that's not at all what it is. It's figuring out your choices, figuring out what resources you have to your around you, just keep looking and figure out what makes you tick and then go from there. Surround yourself with the people that truly care for you and they will help you along the way. And go with your gut feeling. If I could go back, to the time when I took that shot, hindsight's always 2020, but I wouldn't have done it. But if I didn't, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And I truly just want to take my history and do whatever I can to help someone in the future make best choices for their family.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of what I talk to them on the phone about is where are you at and what can we do and what does your day look like? And it's okay that it's not the same every day. It's okay to be upset about that diagnosis. It's
Yeah.
okay to have help to get out of the shower. There's it's fine, but there's other people that will support you in figuring out what journey might be the best one.
Yeah. And they say that the one of the actually the most important things in recovery is having purpose. And I think you found your purpose.
I
So
did.
we're
Thank you.
glad for that.
Yes,
Yes.
me too.
Drop your comments below. Make sure to share this with somebody who might benefit from today's episode. Like and subscribe, and tune in for the next time, the Dr. Mollie James Show.